Hey, good morning, guys, and thank you for joining us today for another Cyber Talk with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence here within the Ontario government. We have been away for a while because we have been trying to revamp the show to deliver really a new approach for 2023. I can't believe I'm saying that already, but the wait is finally over, guys, and we are back with a new and improved Cyber Talk show. We wanted to bring you all one more episode before we really close off the chapter of 2022. But while we were away, we at Ontario Cybersecurity Center of Excellence have been working hard. And as you may know, October was Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the Center of Excellence has really been putting out weekly content to really educate and spread awareness on cybersecurity for those across the Ontario Public Service, but as well as a broader public sector, almost Canada-wide. So Cybersecurity Awareness Month was not just limited to October. No, this campaign started in September, where we really kicked things off with two student events to really further our cyber youth strategy. And it didn't stop there. We were just having so much fun. We wanted it to extend this out to all the way to November, joined by our panel of cyber experts to really answer the audience's burning questions about cybersecurity. And if you've been following us, you will know that our theme for Cyber Month this year was managing digital risks. And we're able to put a fun spin on it by bringing everyone into a virtual cyber galaxy. As each week, participants were able to work towards leveling up their cyber knowledge. And by the end of the month, once they've completed their mission, to becoming a cyber defender for their organization. So again, although October seems like it's far away and it's over, we're never truly done talking about cybersecurity. And in today's Cyber Talk session, we will be continuing the discussion on how to manage digital risks in our everyday lives. So I am so excited today as we introduce our two very special guests here. First off, we have Rhonda Bunn. She is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Ministry of Public Business Service and Delivery here at the Ontario government. She's got a very interesting background. Can you share a little bit about your journey there, Rhonda, to your career?
Oh, so thank you, Julia. I have been very fortunate in my career. So I did start off in the private sector and moved into the public sector around 11. Actually, it's going to be 12 years ago now that we're very close to 2023. But started off as the CIO, took on expanded roles overseeing HR. So it was really interesting to have people process technology in one area. So I thought it was really innovative for a team to do that, and then took on the role of a CAO. So, the common theme across all the roles that I've had has been the people side of things. So how do you motivate people and how do you work with people to deliver great results? So yeah, I've been very fortunate and excited to be part of the Ontario government, working with yourself and others like Robert. And it's interesting. And I have to say, I have not been bored one day since I've been at the government, and I can't believe it's just over 7 months. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Rhonda. Definitely big shoes to fill in terms of protecting Ontario's cybersecurity. And next, of course, we have Robert Wong, known especially in the past few months here, chair of the broader public sector cybersecurity expert panel, also a man that is known as doing it all. Robert, if you can just share with us, a little bit about your background and your journey.
Yeah, sure, Julia. Currently, I'm a retired executive from Toronto Hydro, having worked there for over 30 years. Started out as an electrical engineer, working in engineering and operations. Then was promoted to the executive ranks, taking on responsibilities such as enterprise risk management, corporate strategic planning, corporate governance, business continuity, business performance. And then I was asked to take on the IT role as a CIO. And that was what I was doing for the last 10 years of my career at Toronto Hydro, which included cybersecurity. Shortly before I retired, I was also nominated and appointed as chair of the broader public sector cybersecurity expert panel. And we recently wrapped up our 2-year mandate with a report with recommendations to the minister on how to improve cybersecurity practices across the broader public sector. And so in my spare time now as a retiree, I'm doing some board work at the IESO and some consulting work and playing a little bit of golf.
That's always nice. Well, we're definitely in for a treat today with having our two cyber experts, and especially on my side, getting to ask them all the challenging questions today. But before we get started, I do want to set the stage and define what digital risk is. So digital risk, and of course, we're going to be talking about this throughout our show today, but it really refers to all unexpected consequences that result from the digital transformation and disruptions in terms of us achieving our business objectives. But one of these being cybersecurity risks, or the risk of a cyber attack, really when a malicious actor or malicious or a cyber criminal, we refer to, attempts to damage or destroy a computer network or system. So really properly managing your digital risks is really a key component in creating a successful organization, which is why it's such an important topic to talk about, which leads me to my first question. And I'm going to open this up to both Rhonda and Rob here. In your perspective, what is digital risk and how would you advise we manage it?
Well, I'll jump in actually and start off, and then Robert can jump in as well. So, for me, one of the best ways is for an organization to reduce the risk is really creating that culture of cybersecurity. So it's making sure that people and employees within the organization know the risks are real and that it's not going to happen to someone else, but that it could happen within their organization. I think there's two parts of that too. It's, how can they be a part of preventing it, but also, understanding what happens if a risk, if something occurs. And really, I'm probably stealing the phrase from another organization I worked at, but it's really making cybersecurity the part of the DNA of the organization. So we spend so much money, millions of dollars on hardware, software, and a lot of organizations don't spend as much money or even a fraction of that on training. And I think that's probably the biggest bang for your buck, is to train employees as to what the threats are that could be out there, how to look and identify what could be a threat. And I think another key part is for an organization to make it okay for if someone clicks on a threat on a suspicious email or a link to say, hey, I've clicked on this, and do it right away so they feel like they can actually approach, and so then the risk can be managed. So, we know that threats are also malware, ransomware, and engineering attacks, but there's also the workforce risk that we're all facing today. So there is a shortage of talent within the cybersecurity space. And so I think that even heightens why we want to train employees, because we need everyone to sort of own this. And it's always said cybersecurity is more than just an IT function. It is everyone's responsibility. So I think that training piece is important. And the fact that we're moving more things to the cloud actually just opens up a whole bunch of new challenges. So, I'll leave it that training's important, but that culture is very important for making sure that we help address those.
That's an excellent point there, Rhonda, in terms of, people and culture. Definitely is at the forefront in cybersecurity particularly, but I think this is probably something that we can even expand on at every organization, private or public. Over to you, Rob, if you've got anything to add to this question here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just want to kind of follow up on your definition of the digital risk, and I know that's kind of the theme of today's talk, is the cybersecurity aspects of it. But Rhonda touched on workforce risk. The availability of skilled resources to help manage and control that risk. There is also other aspects of digital risks around compliance, around third-party partners that you work with, your digital transformation initiatives, and the amount of technology adoption and automation that your organization is facing when you're adopting these technologies, privacy, data. And so there are many kind of components or categories related to digital risk. And in terms of managing it, and I agree with Rhonda, it's really the end goal is to have a cyber risk aware culture. And so how do you go about developing that and nurturing that? And I'll kind of reference my risk management background. It's really around really identifying and understanding the nature of that digital risk, whether, it's cyber or whatever. And there's kind of, best practices that go around and doing that. Ideally, your organization would have an enterprise risk management practice, and digital risk or cyber risk should be, one of the top ones. But you go through that process where the risk management team should lead this exercise, because they are the experts in managing risk, working with different cross-functional groups within the organization, and really to understand how these threats can happen, and their existence in your organization, and what are the different business impacts to different areas of the organization, because that risk has different impacts, whether it's operational or it's transactional, privacy, whatever it may be, and really understanding that, and developing mitigations, corrective actions to control and manage that risk to the level of risk appetite that your organization has accepted and approved. So I think Rhonda talked about more operational controls that you can take, whether it's education and awareness training, but putting in a lot of the best practice cybersecurity practices around identity or privilege access management, segregation of duties. It's really around the people, process, and technology, those aspects, multi-factor authentication, threat intelligence monitoring, all the necessary things that you have to do to manage cybersecurity risk, and having the tools in place, the practices, the people aware, being vigilant, constantly, and continuously monitoring and reassessing those risks as you implement those controls and measures, and to see what the status of those risks. So it's not a one and done. It's a business practice that's continuous, and you should be enhancing it, improving it, and maturing it over time.
Absolutely there, Robert. I think, just to add to that, and what you said is you really hit it in terms of the risk that we face in the digital landscape really impacts an organizations on the operational side, the privacy side, but there's also the financial performance side. Reputation is a big one, and more, and especially coming from, the public sector. But it's really important for organizations to continually prioritize how our digital transformation translates to how do we accelerate growth and improve productivity, right? We talked about the workplace culture, but education and awareness still continues to be at the forefront. And I don't think there's any pause on that. If anything, it's just going to increase as we spearhead into the new year. But there are benefits in terms of managing digital risk and really showcasing the aftermath of a digital attack that we've seen just this past year alone. Like in terms of, if we're looking back at our stats, 82% of breaches are really linked to that human element that's based on weakness, right? So this includes social attacks, errors, and misuses. So this is why it's critical for the Center of Excellence here to continue to improve our heightened organizational awareness, preparedness. But this is why we need to continue to promote. If our organization doesn't know where to begin, we have resources ready for you. So that leads me to my next question. How can we best document and catalog our digital risks? Are there any templates or maybe techniques that you would recommend?
I'll jump in. Again, going back to my risk management days and experience, I would recommend using a standard risk assessment template. And you document and capture the information in this template as part of your overall risk registry. And the template should have, columns or roles to identify the risk, describe the risk, categorize the risk, do the analysis, determine the probability and the impact of that risk, and what mitigations and most importantly, who the risk owner is. Accountability is so important. And then the status of the risk is, assuming you're continually implementing controls and corrective actions, and you're doing assessments on a regular basis, you should see hopefully, improvements and changes to that status of the risk. But it's, it's not only important to document the risk, it's what do you do about it, right? It's these corrective actions and prioritizing, which risks are highest priority, and devoting resources and commitment and tracking the completion of those actions. And, it's the tools, the templates could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, or there are commercially available software to manage enterprise risks for organizations.
That's fantastic, Robert. I'm curious, actually, in terms of the recommendations that you have here, in terms of formalizing your processes, is there something that you have done in the past that you wish you said, this is a lesson learned, I wish I had known this while I was going through this process?
Yeah, I mean, risk management in general, there's a level of subjectivity or even biases, when you talk to individuals. So the key and the goal, I guess, always is try to be as objective and fact-based and evidence-based as much as possible, and take that subjectivity and personal biases out of it. Just because something hasn't happened ever doesn't mean it can't happen. It's not necessarily a black swan, if you will. Yeah. I think that's kind of, my lesson learned, or my takeaway is, try to make the risk assessment as objective and fact and evidence-based as possible.
Excellent. Rhonda, any suggestions you have on documenting and cataloging your digital risk, or any techniques?
Yeah, so I really like what you said, Robert, in just now, but also in the first question when you talked about continually, evaluate. So it is a continual, cycle, and I think we've seen that over the last 2 years, especially that, things are not how they started out, and you need to be very nimble and shift. So, and I'm going to steal a bit of your thunder as well, because I think the work that you and your team did on the expert panel was great. And, the recommendation around prioritizing emergency preparedness resources that can really facilitate communication and collaboration in the face of adverse events. So, creating playbooks, if you can, I think, to Robert's point, Excel spreadsheet, how you document it is probably, less important than just actually having it documented. Understanding, what you need to do, whether it's data recovery, if there's insurance that, and I know may talk about that further, but, just procedures in place. I think that, one of the ways to also do this could be tabletop exercises. So we have, if you think about emergency management and emergency preparedness, there's a lot of times where if, that there's exercises that are done, I know, annually at municipalities to look at, if a disaster occurred, a natural disaster. And so we think of, preparedness for that. In the same vein, cybersecurity, preparing for that as well. So it does, it could take out systems, it could, change the way people work. So it's doing these tabletop exercises, I think, is a really good way to to bring that awareness to stakeholders. I'm hoping I'm not going to take any of your thunder on this, Julia, but the work that you and your team are doing on it to make it really relevant, to make it engaging during the sessions, I think is really critical, because it's all about just, and Robert, you talked about it, it's things that could occur that you may not even know are going to occur. And it's just coming up with those ideas and thinking about, what could the possibility be and how could we be prepared if it hits. And so tabletop exercises, I'd say, are, a must for an organization, and great way to really engage with other areas.
That's fantastic. And thanks for the shout out there, Rhonda. That's absolutely true. And I think the takeaway here is you never know when it's going to occur. We don't have a shield in front of us, and we've got a cybersecurity team just to kind of protect everything. Cyber insurance is not going to cut it as well. But I know that we're going to probably dive into a few more questions for you guys today in terms of dispelling a few myths along the way of, why people have this perception that I would never be a target in terms of a cyber attack, or my organization won't be. But maybe moving things ahead in terms of, as we kind of wrap up the year, the world is definitely more technologically advanced than it has ever been. And we've seen that especially in this year alone. And technology really continues to skyrocket in complexity and its creativity. But with that being said, in terms of new technologies and the digital tools, it also presents new risks, as we know. But with this in mind, how best can we really evaluate these new products for risks? Maybe we'll start with you, Robert, then over to Rhonda.
Yeah, so as a former CIO, I dealt with that on a kind of regular basis, and so first of all, one of my big objectives was to avoid having shadow IT in your organization. Involve, this is a big engagement to the business units who are always looking for new technology tools, right? And it's understandable. It improves productivity and capabilities and a lot of value adds. But I always ask them, we'll help you, but involve the IT group early on before you commit to procuring anything. When it's after the fact, and then you find out that there's all sorts of cyber risks, or maybe it doesn't even work, or it's not compatible in your own environment, in your IT environment. Second of all, I would say never take the word of the vendor's sales rep, because their objective is to sell. I would have my technical people talk to their technical people and really understand the technical details around the product. Get them to ask the right questions, ask for references. Who else have deployed this product? What were their experiences? Are there any recent failures? And what are the nature of those failures? Understand how the technology interacts with your own existing systems, and don't be afraid to demand or ask for a proof of concept, a pilot, and really stress test it around performance and how it would work in your environment. And there's a big difference between you're dealing with a reputable, established vendor versus a startup, and sometimes even when you're dealing with who you think is a big reputable vendor, because of constant mergers and acquisitions of other companies and their products, you got to be really sure: are you dealing with the primary vendor, or you're dealing with an acquisition with a product that maybe don't have the same level of maturity and capabilities, and that they really address some of the cybersecurity risks around it. And then furthermore, I think you alluded to whether it's going to be cloud or on-premise solution. There's a difference there, and the associated risks around that, especially around data residency and so forth. And ask the vendors about their approach to how they manage cybersecurity, in their own organization, in their product development, and what safe coding techniques do they deploy or employ, and do they have any security certificates that they follow certain frameworks or standards and policies, and make sure that the key security requirements are embedded in the contract that you ultimately sign. But I think most of all, I think you really need to ensure that your existing cybersecurity tools, technologies, models, or frameworks are in place to make sure that any new products that you introduce into your own environment will be protected. Whether it's encryption or identity access management, multi-factor authentication. If you have a SASE kind of solution or zero trust model that you're working towards, making sure that that's probably the most important, is having the good housekeeping in place so that you're capable of introducing new technologies without incurring the risks that may come with it.
Absolutely. Good housekeeping. And that's well said there, Robert. I think that's a great takeaway from that. It's all about, what's the checklist here, from stress tests to ensuring that we make sure that we do our due diligence in terms of what are the requirements, what are we signing up for, and having all those kind of needs in place, but ultimately, is it well protected? Moving things over in terms of Ontario cybersecurity strategy. We talk about that quite a bit in our day-to-day work, but in terms of our strategy here, it's quite extensive, but mitigating those risks. Like, how does our current strategy mitigate the risks that we see associated specifically with human error? Over to you, Rhonda.
So to add on to Robert's points on product and risk, the key is product risk management. So as we know, risks are inevitable, and to mitigate the risks, we really need to prepare ourselves. So even a simple activity can turn into an unexpected problem. So Ontario's Cybersecurity Division does provide government-wide cybersecurity services, and it includes managing cyber risk by predicting, identifying, and eliminating threats to information security. So we do support the broader public sector within our province by ensuring that we provide access to best practices, advice and guidance, and promote the sharing and discussions of cyber-related information. And in fact, in the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which again is more than just October, in Ontario was managing digital risks. And we know that phishing, it accounts for just under half of all the breaches. And given that 3% of breaches involved a technical vulnerability exploit, according to the Verizon 2021 Data Breach Investigations Report, we look at whether we're investigating enough in our human factor or spending enough time and effort on the 3%. And according to the Verizon's 2019 investigations report, 30% of all phishing emails are opened and 12% of links are clicked. So that's huge. That's a large number. So we spoke about it before on education, but we have at the province expanded our corporate phishing campaign to educate staff and on the various attempts to gain information, and to 65,000 of our employees monthly. And as a preventative measure, our email security products provide us with technical controls to help curb incoming phishing emails. So that's also a huge help. And there are online cybersecurity learning modules. Just have to do, again, another plug for the Education and Center of Excellence. When I was at the MISA conference, many people came up and said, wow, I hadn't actually been on your site and the information there is excellent. So I'll encourage everyone to go on and look, because there are learning modules there, as well as education and awareness materials are available on that site. And the exploitation of our digital trust has especially been an issue since the pandemic. So remaining vigilant is key, and probably end off on that, because it is a huge point there.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Rhonda. Definitely visit Ontario's learning portal, www.cybersecurityontario.ca. I think I do say this every single day. So it does run quite smoothly, but there's a ton of resources on there, including a incident kind of risk calculator as well. So that's actually a really important resource. Following some of our modules, there's definitely some additional resources that you can tap into and connect in directly with our Cybersecurity Operations Center. All right, as we're talking about, digital risks and, ways that we can evaluate products for risks, I think it naturally leads into the discussion of cybersecurity insurance. It's new, it's still new, but it's definitely an emerging industry. What, especially from years ago when, you see sales reps going door to door from business to business selling cybersecurity insurance. What is it all about? We don't need cybersecurity insurance. There were $50 plans. I don't think there's any $50 plans that exist today. But anyone here is viewing, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But cybersecurity policies, they can really change from one month to the next, as we've seen, especially in the height of this pandemic that we faced. But given the dynamic and fluctuating nature of the associated cyber risks that we see on a day-to-day basis, impacting us globally. So the question I have is really, what is cyber liability insurance, and why is it so important?
So maybe I'll start off on that one. So it is an insurance policy that provides businesses with a combination of coverage options, and it's intended to help protect companies from data breaches or other security issues. And I still recall from a session I was at in Barrie when the OPP came in and said it's not a question of, if your organization will suffer a breach, it's when. And, not to put too many quotes in here, but Roger Mueller, the former director of the FBI, had said, there are two types of organizations, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. So, with that in mind, many companies are thinking of insurance, and trends show that from 2019 to 2020, there was a loss ratio increase from 87% to 271%, which is huge. And the majority of the claims went to foreign P&C companies. So cyber insurance in the commercial marketplace, they're definitely much more than $50, as you mentioned that they once were. So the premiums are increasing. The coverage is being reduced as well at the same time as the increase in premiums. And a lot of people are not meeting the threshold that's required in order to get insurance. So, there are three core coverage areas that we look for. One is the network security and privacy liability. So that is when a third party seeks compensation for damages or failure to protect their sensitive data. There's the network restoration and interruption, and this is, the cost to repair, restore, and also for the downtime. It also could include, having someone also come out and help. So I think a lot of smaller organizations benefit from that. And then the last is the criminal one, which is the, electronic threat of theft of funds and the social engineering fraud. So yeah, those are a couple of points and on the cyber.
What we take away from that, cyber insurance is very critical in many aspects. Over to you, Robert, for your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Rhonda mentioned. I still remember back in the day when cyber insurance never existed, and now it's a real hot topic and becomes more and more necessary as the volume of cyber breaches has happened, and the amount the cost to recover and pay for ransoms and so forth have really escalated. I guess a couple of perspectives. In my mind, it's still an insurance policy, and you shouldn't just rely on cyber insurance. I mean, you really still need to focus on doing the right thing on a day-to-day basis and to really protect the organization. And I guess the ironic part is if you're doing all that, there's actually a lower need for cyber insurance and you become more eligible for cyber insurance. So there's that added benefit, and on the contrary, those who are not eligible, now you're incented to improve your cybersecurity posture and your capabilities so that you become eligible. Besides the money that to cover the costs of a cybersecurity breach, I think Rhonda mentioned, they also provide skilled resources that organizations may not have access to, whether it's a breach coach, somebody to negotiate with the ransomware attackers, help with the forensics to understand the nature of the attack and the extent of the damage, and help with recovery and restoration, and around managing your reputational risks. They could also assist with communications and crisis management and media relations and so forth, as well as any legal implications around potential claims and lawsuits, for that could result because of the breach. So I think, in my mind, it's nice to have, but it's no substitute for actually, doing what you should really be doing, is to, act as responsibly as possible to protect the organization against cyber breaches. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and as part of our assessment in the expert panels analysis and recommendations, a lot of organizations, especially smaller ones, they're not in position to acquire cyber insurance, and we're looking at novel ideas around sharing resources, pooling, in a kind of a co-op type of scenario, to kind of self-insure as a group. And so we'll see what goes from here, but it's a very fast-moving, dynamic area of focus right now.
Absolutely.
If I can just jump in on that, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, Robert, when you said, insurance doesn't substitute what needs to be done in an organization. So yeah, just to key in on that part, because it is so important that you have to actually make sure that you keep up. And if you're not able to get insurance, as you said, that's a really good indicator that maybe there are things that you should be doing. So yeah, just want to key in because I thought it was a brilliant point.
Absolutely. And I think just like from, I love stats, so I'm going to go back to my stats here in terms of global cyber insurance market. And a recent stat from this year, actually, it's estimated that we're growing at a compound average of almost 25% per year from 2021 to 2026 to really reach a total market size of almost 28 billion US dollars. So there's definitely continual interest in cyber insurance space. I do see that there's lots of questions coming in from our audience today. Hang tight, guys. We will get started on your questions in a few minutes, but I do want to move on to our very last question that we ask all of our guests here on our show, ending things off of asking something that audience can hopefully take with them today as they continue with their own cybersecurity journeys. What is the best cybersecurity advice you can give or have ever received?
I'll start. When I was CIO, I reported to our board on a regular basis on our cybersecurity situation and what are the risks and what we're doing about it. And one of the board members asked a very profound question: was, okay, if this cyber risk manifested, what's the business impact? And I think that was brilliant, because you really need to tie it back to what is the business impact, whether it's to operations, to your ability to serve your customers, protecting data, privacy, personally identifiable information, whatever that may be. Everything relates back to business impact, and that will inform you on how important or how critical that risk is, and what how much effort and resources you should devote to controlling and managing that risk, and decisions should be made on a risk-based basis. So that's my advice.
Thanks very much, Robert. Rhonda? Yeah, so I agree with everything Robert said, definitely based on risk. We do know that cyber criminals are continuing to scheme to get more sophisticated in their approaches. So I'll maybe come back and pivot back to the education piece. I think it's educating people, making all employees understand that they're a part of the solution. So it's not just an IT function. It's not just a cybersecurity function. It is everyone's function to ensure that they understand and that they can, they have the tools and the education to know how to detect a breach. And, I think it's up to organizations as well to make it safe for people to come forward. And so if they've clicked on something, rather than them trying to sort of go, I don't want to tell anyone, make it comfortable for them to come forward to say, hey, I clicked on this, and then things can be actioned. So that would be, probably what I would leave is just that education piece is huge, and, making everyone understand what they should look for, but also how they should report it.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Rhonda. All right, so I know we are almost at time. I'm going to move things over now to our Q&A. I know our audience here has some questions for us, so keep them rolling through, guys. Let's move things over and switch to our Q&A. Our first question here is curious, any particular risk register templates you would recommend?
I'll take that. You know what? I think they're pretty standard. I think you can do a Google search online and you're going to find a bunch of them, and they're all fairly similar. I don't think there's one that's better than another. It's just whatever makes sense for you and your organization.
All right, so moving on, moving quickly to our next question. How do you maintain a risk score? I'll open it up first to you guys on our advice, and then maybe share some of the resources that we have on our end.
Yeah, so you know what, Julia, I'm going to leave that one to you to talk about what we have on our end. So if that, I think your comments will be great.
Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, so in terms of maintaining our risk score, you'll be happy to know that we do have resources in-house available. It's actually a new service that we've launched here in partnership from the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, as well as our 24/7 Cybersecurity Operations Center here at the Ontario Government. So if you are from the broader public sector in an organization and you want to see where your risk score is at, we do have this service for free, which is super exciting because we want to support the broader public sector. So we leverage a vendor actually called BitSight to really analyze all the risk scores across your organizations. We do it ourselves as well, just to kind of get a better idea of the cyber landscape. But I know that within the health sector, education sector, this is definitely a priority and definitely something that we have piloted in previous years, but we are now at a ready state to start sharing that out more broadly. So in terms of that service there, once you connect in with us, we'll be walking you through kind of the steps and the services that it entails, as well as creating more of a deeper dive of the assessment and some recommendations from our cybersecurity experts on our side. Robert, anything to add on that question?
Yeah, I'm familiar with BitSight, and they go into publicly available IP addresses and monitor your activities and assign you a score. But on kind of a more general kind of risk management practice, maintaining a risk score, it's really the summation of all your enterprise risks that you're monitoring and measuring. And there's standard kind of practices out there, whether it's a 1 to 5 scale, probability times impact, and you get a score, and you can sum it all up to one overall score for the organization that you can monitor on an ongoing basis, whether it's going up or down, and then the trends and so forth. So again, that's a very simple kind of mathematical approach to maintaining a risk score for the enterprise.
Excellent advice there, Robert. Thank you. It seems like our audience today is very curious, and I definitely have promoted curiosity. It leads to many things in terms of the education awareness side and learning new things each day. Their next question for our audience is also curious around the frequency of risk register reviews around those registers.
So I'll start off, and So from our risk registry review, so we, the Ontario government, from a overall review, once a year, we will review our, from an ISF and NIST standpoint, where we're at as a holistic view, and we will self-rate ourselves and as well do have third-party assessments. From our risk registry, something that we are spending a lot of time on over the last several months, and we do work closely with our with the Office of the Chief Risk Officer as well as our Privacy Officer to ensure that we're also aligned on, definitions and risks, as well as, how we capture the information and how we report out. So we report out on that quite frequently as well. And there are a lot of reviews and audits that we do with regards to our risk registry.
And in my experience managing enterprise risk management at Toronto Hydro, we do an annual review of our risk registry and come up with a new top 10 risks that we take to the board on an annual basis. As well, we go to the board for approval of our risk appetite on an annual basis. And it's not just a risk appetite statement, it's actually a bit of a matrix where we qualitatively and quantitatively define each risk, what we call dimension, whether it's reputation, financials, operations, safety, whatever it may be. They're defined quantitatively as well as qualitatively, so it's easy for employees to understand. But on an ongoing basis, we review the top 10 risks and work with the business to continually analyze, assess, and also work on the controls and mitigating actions and report on the progress of implementing those actions on a monthly basis.
Wonderful. Yeah. Robert, our next question is around automation tools for risk registers, like same topic. Any specific tools that you would recommend here for audience?
I mean, there's, like I mentioned, there's a bunch of commercially available ones in the marketplace. I can't recommend one over another one. Just haven't been exposed to all the various ones, in the marketplace. But it's readily available. I just can't pick one over another.
Wonderful. All right, moving on to, I think we're moving outside of the reviews, but our next question goes to wondering how do organizations in different sizes all implement the NIST framework? And I'm assuming this audience member here has reviewed or has been in the know of our cybersecurity expert panel and their interim and to our final report. Over to you, Robert.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you got to do it systematically because it's a huge endeavor. I mean, I would start with, hiring somebody to come in and do an assessment of your current state, your baseline against the NIST framework. There are organizations out there who are very familiar with it. They'll come in, look at all your artifacts and talk to people and understand how you're managing cybersecurity risks today, and so you will have an assessment against the framework. In it will define and identify where your gaps are, and which ones are they'll be high, medium, and low priority. And so based on that, you'll have to prioritize, which area you want to focus on, and you're going to have to balance that against your available resources, whether it's budgets or skill resources and, and competing priorities of the organization. So I think that's my advice. We did that assessment every 3 years because it's a 3-year rotation in terms of addressing the gaps and implementing corrective actions to close those gaps. So it's a 3-year cycle. First year we really assess our operational technologies, which, in our mind was probably the most critical because, we're trying to keep the lights on at Toronto Hydro. And so operational technologies were highest priority. Then your traditional IT systems. And then the third assessment was around your standards and policies and procedures, all the documentation that support your operational practices around managing cybersecurity aligned to the NIST framework. On an annual basis, my team, as part of their performance objective, is to close so many of these identified gaps each year. And, we measure it, we report on it, and they get compensated against achieving those goals and objectives. So that was my experience in how we try to implement in this framework.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so critical, and especially in this time and age, in terms of to get to your goals and your objectives here is just really scheduling a regular touch point and cadence for your check-ins. What are the gaps? Where are we at? What do we need to do? Right. So those are kind of like the three areas here that I know that we always have discussions on to kind of move the needles on things on how we're achieving our goals. I think we have time for maybe just 2 more questions today. And of course, for any questions that we're not able to answer on today's show, you can always connect in with us. I think we're all quite active on LinkedIn as well. So that's definitely a tool here that I connect with many of you guys. What is the worst case scenario if a cyber attack were to occur to my organization? Who wants to jump on this one here?
Wow. So I'll start. I think there are probably a couple of worst case, but one is that you can't get at the data and your organization can't continue to operate. There would be downtime, and then I guess the financial part of it too. So it's the disruption, the financial loss. I'm probably naming more than just one, but yeah, their reputation, sensitive data is breached. That is a huge one as well. So, having sensitive data that has come from your organization, and then the, damage to public safety and trust. So I gave, I think, 5 or 6, but those are quite not great outcomes should a breach occur.
Yeah, so I'll go back to my, days at Toronto Hydro, and our main objective is to keep the lights on, and so that's the highest priority. So any kind of cyber attack, and it's been proven that it can happen, is that it will damage or destroy critical infrastructure. Remember the Stuxnet, malware that took down the Iranian nuclear centrifuges. I think MIT or one of the leading university did a demonstration where they hooked up a transformer, and through a cyber attack, a malware, caused it to explode. And so that's the biggest fear is, a large piece of critical infrastructure is irreparably damaged. It may even cause casualties, fatalities to workers, or even the public in the vicinity of an explosion and so forth. Being a critical piece of infrastructure, typically you don't have backup or spares lying around, and so it could take months or before that can be replaced. And so, that was always, my worst case scenario that kept me up at nights.
Yeah, always think of the worst case scenario. I mean, that's not kind of positive thinking, but that's our way to kind of protect ourselves, right? You've got your plans in place as well, and your backup options. One last question I can take here from the audience is, how does risk differ from pre-pandemic and now?
Wow. So great question. You know what, I think, the outcome of the risk is potentially the same, that, how it could affect an organization. But I would say we've seen an increase in the number of attacks that have occurred. We've seen an increase in the sophistication. So I think the difference that I have seen is that, breaches have increased in terms of numbers. So the likelihood of it happening has increased. And you've got people working from home, you've got different landscapes, so you're not always in front of people. If they came into your building and saw this big sign that said, cybersecurity, don't forget to do this, you don't get that today with people in different locations. So I think, there's a locational, difference, there's the numbers and instances, and I know we're out of time, so I'll let Robert finish off if he wanted to add anything.
No, I totally agree. I think the probability has gone up, and I think also the awareness has gone up, which is good. But I agree in terms of impact. I don't think it has changed very much at all.
Totally agree. All right, that's a wrap in terms of our Q&A session, and really concludes our Cyber Talk session for today. Wonderful discussion. We talked everything about managing digital risk, which is quite a broad topic, and just for cybersecurity alone. But I think for a few key takeaways for our audience today, and summarizing from our special guests, is it's important to remember that digital risk is an ongoing threat, right? And because of it, we need to continually manage it daily to keep ourselves safe. Decisions that you make as part of your organization or part of your role should be made around risk-based basis. When it comes to managing digital risks, having that mindset, making sure that there's education and awareness to influence the workforce culture, and your colleagues and your friends around you, to make sure that they're also in that strong mindset, but also making sure that you're proactive to see what tools and solutions are available to you. Are you keeping up with your cyber insurance, for instance? But you can't just buy cyber insurance and forget about actively protecting yourself against these ongoing cyber attacks and threats that we're seeing here. All right. Again, thank you so much to Rhonda and Robert for giving their time and advice, and those of you who have stayed on and watched and participated. This will be our final Cyber Talk session for the year, but don't worry, guys, we are coming back very soon. It's been a wonderful year in 2022, and we will be ready for 2023 with many more amazing topics and guest speakers coming on the show. So do make sure to stay tuned and come back next year to see more. At this point here, stay cyber safe, and see you soon, guys.